heard the stories about the old train that ran through the mountains at night. Some said it was haunted, others that it was cursed. But Jacob didn't believe in ghosts or curses, and he was looking for a new adventure. So one night, he set out to find the midnight train for himself. He hiked through the mountains for hours, following a winding path that led deeper and deeper into the wilderness. As the moon rose higher in the sky, he began to hear the distant sound of a train whistle. Excited, he quickened his pace, eager to catch a glimpse of the legendary midnight train. At last, he came to a clearing in the woods, and there it was, a long, dark train, its windows glowing with an eerie blue light. Jacob felt a shiver run down his spine, but he pushed his fear aside and climbed aboard. The train was empty, but it seemed to be moving of its own accord, chugging deeper and deeper into the heart of the mountains. Jacob wandered through the cars, peering into the empty compartments and feeling the strange, oppressive weight of the darkness around him. As the train reached a particularly steep part of the mountainside, Jacob heard a faint whispering in his ear. He turned, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until he could make out words.
"Get off the train, before it's too late."
Jacob felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He knew he should listen to the voice, that he should leave the train and never look back. But he was too curious, too stubborn. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to turn back now. As the train crested the mountain and began to pick up speed, Jacob heard a new sound, a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of hundreds of feet, marching in perfect unison, getting closer and closer with each passing moment. And then he saw them, a legion of ghosts, soldiers in tattered uniforms, marching through the train as if they owned it. They passed right through Jacob, their icy fingers sending shivers down his spine. With a scream of terror, Jacob finally leapt from the train, tumbling down the side of the mountain and landing in a tangled heap at the bottom. He lay there for a long time, gasping for breath and trying to make sense of what he had seen. But then he heard it, the distant sound of the train's whistle, growing louder and louder as it approached him. He looked up, and there it was, hurtling down the mountain towards him, its blue lights flickering like flames. With a surge of adrenaline, Jacob scrambled to his feet and began to run, sprinting as fast as he could away from the train. But it was no use, the train was too fast, too powerful. It caught up to him in seconds, swallowing him whole in a blaze of blue light. When Jacob awoke, he was in a strange room, surrounded by darkness. He felt disoriented, confused, as if he had been asleep for a long time. He tried to get up, but he couldn't move, as if he were strapped to a table. Then he heard a voice, a soft, coming from the shadows.
"Welcome. You have been chosen to join us."
Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. He knew he was in terrible danger, that he had stumbled into something far beyond his comprehension. He struggled to break free, but the restraints held him tight. The voice continued to speak, its tone lulling Jacob into a false sense of security.
"We are the lost souls, trapped in this eternal darkness. And we have chosen you, Jacob, to join us in our eternal rest."
Jacob felt a wave of fear wash over him. He had heard stories of cults that lured unsuspecting victims into their grasp, and he feared he had fallen into one. But then he heard a familiar sound, the sound of a train whistle. It was distant at first, but it grew louder and louder until it filled the room. The shadows around Jacob began to shift and twist, as if they were alive. And then he saw it, the blue light flickering in the darkness as the midnight train approached. With a sudden burst of energy, Jacob broke free from his restraints and ran towards the train, hoping to escape the darkness and the voices that threatened to consume him. But the train was moving too fast, and it caught up to him in an instant. The blue light washed over him, and he felt his body being pulled into the train, as if by some invisible force. As he tumbled into the darkness of the train, Jacob saw the lost souls waiting for him, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of joy and madness. And then everything went black. When Jacob awoke, he found himself lying in a field outside the woods, the early morning sun just beginning to rise. He felt disoriented, confused, as if he had been asleep for a long time. As he stumbled to his feet, Jacob realized he had no memory of what had happened to him after he boarded the midnight train. It was as if those hours had been erased from his mind. Shaken but alive, Jacob knew he had been lucky to escape with his life. He turned his back on the woods and the midnight train and vowed never to return again. But in the back of his mind, he knew that the lost souls were still out there, waiting for their next victim. And he wondered, with a creeping sense of dread, who it would be next. After the harrowing experience in the woods, Jacob was plagued with nightmares and a deep sense of dread. He knew he had to find a way to get rid of the train and the ghosts once and for all. He started by searching online for information about haunted trains and ghostly apparitions. After hours of searching, he stumbled upon a blog post written by a paranormal investigator who had encountered a similar train and its lost souls. The investigator had discovered a ritual that was said to banish the train and the ghosts for good. The ritual involved creating a protective circle with salt and burning a special herb that had purifying properties. The investigator warned that the ritual was dangerous and not to be taken lightly, but Jacob was desperate. He spent the next several days researching everything he could find about the ritual, taking detailed notes and gathering the necessary supplies. Finally, he felt ready to attempt the ritual, hoping that it would bring an end to his nightmare. Jacob returned to the woods where he had first encountered the train and its lost souls, and he began the ritual, reciting the incantations and burning the herb. As the ritual progressed, he could feel a sense of power building within him, and he knew that he was doing something that could change everything. Suddenly, the ground beneath Jacob began to shake, and he could hear the distant sound of a train whistle. The blue light flickered in the distance, and he knew the train was coming. But Jacob was determined. He poured the salt in a circle around him and continued with the ritual, his voice growing louder and more confident with each passing moment. The train itself began to wail, a deafening screech that shook the ground beneath him. But Jacob was resolute. He would not let the train and its ghosts terrorize him any longer. With a final burst of energy, Jacob shouted out a command, a demand that the train leave him and never return. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the train and its ghosts were gone. Jacob stood in the silence of the woods, staring at the spot where the train had been. He could still feel the rush of energy coursing through him, and he knew that something had changed within him. As he walked out of the woods, Jacob felt a newfound sense of strength and confidence. He had faced his fear and emerged victorious, and he knew that he would never be the same again. From that day forward, Jacob lived his life without fear, taking on new challenges and facing them head-on. He never forgot the lessons he had learned in the woods, and he knew that he had the strength to face any challenge that came his way. And even though the memory of the midnight train and its lost souls would stay with him forever, Jacob was at peace, knowing that he had triumphed over his greatest fear,